The night always holds secrets unseen by the eye. Behind the darkness, there are whispers that not everyone can hear, footsteps that shouldn't exist, and shadows that move on their own in the corner of the room. This story isn't just a tale to scare you, it's something that may have happened, or could be happening right now, closer than you think. Listen carefully, and make sure you're not alone while hearing it. Edgar Whitmore never believed in ghosts. To him, every paranormal incident had a logical explanation: science, psychology, or simply the power of suggestion. As a seasoned paranormal investigator, he had spent over a decade debunking myths and legends, traveling to the most haunted places on Earth. His name was well known among academics and horror enthusiasts alike. He was a skeptic but also a relentless seeker of the truth. But there was one place that had always haunted his thoughts: Blackthorn Castle. A hidden relic deep in the English countryside, Blackthorn Castle was infamous for its cursed history. No clear documentation existed on what truly happened inside. The locals refused to speak of it, and those who dared to enter never returned the same. On a cold autumn night, Edgar finally arrived in the small village of Branford, a mile away from the castle. He booked a room at the Hollow Oak Inn, an old-fashioned tavern that looked like it belonged in the 19th century. The air was crisp, the sky overcast, and the village eerily silent, as if the people here had long abandoned the idea of staying outside after dark. Inside the dimly lit lobby, he met the innkeeper, Mrs. Holloway, a frail old woman with sharp eyes. The moment Edgar mentioned Blackthorn Castle, her entire demeanor changed. "You shouldn't be here, dear," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "That place, it's not meant for the living." Edgar smirked. He had heard countless warnings before, each more dramatic than the last. But this time, something felt different. There was an undeniable fear in Mrs. Holloway's eyes, not the kind of fear born from superstition, but from experience. As if she had seen something no human should ever witness. Edgar took out his notebook. "Can you tell me what really happened there?" he asked. Mrs. Holloway exhaled, staring at the fog-covered streets outside. For a long moment, she said nothing. Back in the 16th century, Blackthorn Castle was home to Lady Eleanor Blackthorn. She finally spoke. A noblewoman of high status. But during the witch trials, her own husband accused her of witchcraft. She was locked away inside her own castle, where she died. Edgar quickly scribbled down notes. "And ever since, the castle has been haunted?" Mrs. Holloway shook her head. "Not haunted, dear. It's alive." Edgar frowned. "What do you mean?" The old woman's gaze darkened. "Anyone who enters that castle, it takes something from them. Their memory, their sanity, sometimes even their soul. And they never come out the same." Silence. Outside, the wind howled, rustling the branches of the old oak trees. Edgar tried to remain logical. "So, no one has ever come out alive?" Mrs. Holloway bit her lip. "They came out, but not as themselves." Despite the warnings, Edgar had already made up his mind. His curiosity burned stronger than his fear. If Blackthorn Castle truly had an energy of its own, then he needed to witness it firsthand. But as he wandered through the village that night, he noticed something unsettling. Every house had its windows and doors tightly shut. Not just for warmth, but as if there was an unspoken rule that no one should look toward the castle after sundown. An old man sitting on his porch smoking a pipe noticed him and walked over. "You're not from around here, are you?" the man asked, his voice rough. Edgar shook his head. The man studied him for a moment, then leaned in close. "Whatever you do," he whispered, "never enter that castle. You won't come out the same." Before Edgar could ask more, the old man turned away, entering his house and locking the door with 3 heavy bolts. Something was deeply wrong with this village. And that only made Edgar more intrigued. That night, back in his room, Edgar pulled out a set of old documents he had obtained from a university archive. One of them was a manuscript from 1589, written by a servant who had lived in Blackthorn Castle. Lady Eleanor was innocent. "They imprisoned her without cause, and every night, I heard her weeping through the stone walls. They called her a witch, but she was only a woman betrayed by those she loved. The next page had been torn away. But at the bottom of the remaining page, there was a warning written in hurried, shaky handwriting. The gate in the main hall must not be opened. No one must awaken it. Edgar frowned. The gate? He flipped through the rest of the manuscript, but there were no further mentions of any gate. His curiosity deepened. At dawn, Edgar gathered his equipment: infrared cameras, an audio recorder, and his journal. The road to Blackthorn Castle was a narrow dirt path, winding through a dense forest. The trees stretched high, their twisted branches casting long shadows. As he walked, the temperature noticeably dropped, and the further he went, the quieter the world became. There were no birds. No rustling leaves. No distant sounds of animals. Just silence. Then, at last, he saw it: Blackthorn Castle. A towering, ancient fortress, its stone walls covered in thick moss. The massive wooden gate stood tall, untouched by time. Strange symbols were etched into the surface, their meanings long forgotten. A chill ran down Edgar's spine. Then, a whisper. Leave. Edgar turned sharply. No one. He swallowed. It's just your mind playing tricks on you. Bracing himself, he reached out and pushed the heavy wooden gate. As it creaked open, an unnatural stillness filled the air. And for a fleeting moment, he felt something. As if the castle itself had just woken up. As the massive wooden doors groaned open, Edgar stepped into Blackthorn Castle. The scent of damp stone and decay clung to the air, heavy and suffocating. Dust swirled in the dim light that barely seeped through the crack-stained glass windows. His boots echoed against the marble floor, the sound swallowed quickly by the oppressive silence. The entrance hall was vast, its ceilings lost in shadows. Ancient tapestries hung from the walls, depicting scenes of a noblewoman surrounded by hooded figures. Her face was serene, but her eyes, they seemed to follow him. Edgar took a deep breath and switched on his infrared camera, scanning the area. The screen flickered for a second before stabilizing. He saw nothing unusual. Yet, the hairs on his neck stood on end. Then, a faint shuffle echoed from the corridor ahead. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain rational. Probably just an animal, or an illusion caused by the cold air shifting through the ruins. Still, something felt off. Then he noticed it: a trail of footprints in the dust. And they weren't his. Edgar followed the footprints cautiously, moving deeper into the castle. The corridor led him past crumbling statues and rusted candle holders that had long lost their flames. The deeper he went, the colder it became. His breath started to fog in the air. Suddenly, thud. A door at the end of the hallway slammed shut. Edgar stopped in his tracks, gripping his flashlight. The sound echoed unnaturally long, as if the castle itself had sighed. He swallowed his nerves and approached the door. The wood was warped with age, and deep scratches lined its surface as if someone, or something, had clawed at it from the inside. With slow determination, he pushed it open. The room beyond was a library. Rows upon rows of dusty bookshelves loomed around him. Many of the books had disintegrated into nothing but paper dust, but a few remained intact. On the center table lay a single book, untouched by time. Its title was written in Latin. Porta Maledicta. The Cursed Gate. Edgar's hands trembled as he flipped open the book. The pages were aged but sturdy, filled with diagrams, symbols, and handwritten notes in faded ink. As he skimmed through, certain passages stood out. The gate must never be unsealed. Beyond it lies the lady's sorrow, her rage, her hunger. To disturb her is to invite death itself. Edgar frowned. A gate. Mrs. Holloway and the old manuscript had mentioned it too. Then, on the final pages, he found a drawing. It depicted a massive, ornate door with intricate carvings of twisted faces, screaming figures, and strange symbols. Beneath the drawing, a single sentence was scrawled in frantic, jagged handwriting. She waits behind the gate. Do not wake her. At that moment, the candles in the library flared to life, their flames burning blue. And behind him, the sound of whispering filled the air. Edgar spun around, his breath caught in his throat. The library was empty, yet the whispering grew louder, surrounding him like a rising tide. Then, in the reflection of the dusty mirror across the room, he saw her. A woman in a tattered white gown, standing just behind him. Her face was obscured, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. But her lips moved, murmuring words in a language he couldn't understand. Edgar turned instantly, raising his flashlight. But there was nothing there. Only the silence of the castle, deep and watchful. His breathing was ragged. His instincts screamed for him to leave, but his curiosity burned stronger. With trembling hands, he flipped back through the book. Then, at the bottom of the last page, he noticed something he had missed before. A single red stain, smudged across the parchment. It wasn't ink. It was blood. Something told him he was getting close to the truth. But the deeper he dug, the stronger the feeling of being watched became. From the library, he found a second door leading downward, a spiraling stone staircase disappearing into the darkness below. Edgar hesitated, but only for a second. He switched on his night vision camera and began his descent. Step by step, the air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. Something like iron. The deeper he went, the more the walls changed. The old stone gave way to something else, something carved with symbols identical to the ones on the book's cover. Then, at the very bottom of the stairs, he saw it. A massive gate, embedded in the stone wall. It looked exactly like the drawing in the book. Ancient. Cursed. And as he stepped closer, he felt it. A pulse. Like a heartbeat, coming from the other side. Edgar stood frozen before the cursed gate, his heartbeat matching the rhythmic pulse that throbbed from the other side. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to turn back, to run, to leave this place and never return. But his hands trembled with something stronger than fear, an insatiable need to know the truth. He reached out and brushed his fingertips against the cold, ancient surface of the gate. The carvings of twisted faces and screaming figures felt rough beneath his touch, like dried wounds carved into stone. Then, a breath. Warm, wet, inhuman, right against his ear. Edgar spun around, his flashlight sweeping the darkness. Nothing. Just the silence of the underground chamber, thick and watching. Then, the whisper returned. This time, it wasn't coming from behind him. It was coming from the gate itself. A low, rasping voice, hissing in a language he couldn't understand, but somehow, deep in his bones, he knew what it was saying. You should not be here. The air in the chamber grew heavier, pressing down on Edgar's chest like an unseen weight. His breathing was ragged. Then, a sound. Scratch. Soft at first, like nails against stone. Scratch. Scratch. The noise grew louder, more frantic. Something was clawing at the other side of the gate. Edgar stepped back, gripping his flashlight so tightly his knuckles turned white. The book had warned about this. Mrs. Holloway had warned about this. The entire damned village had warned about this. And yet, here he was. Something wanted out. And then the whispering stopped. The chamber plunged into silence. And that was somehow worse. For a long moment, Edgar didn't move. Then, from the corner of his eye, a shadow moved. Not a trick of the light. Not his imagination. A tall, thin figure stood at the far end of the chamber. Its body was impossibly still, shrouded in the darkness of the corridor that led back up to the castle. It had no face, no distinct features, just a black silhouette that seemed to drink in the dim light around it. Edgar's breath hitched. Then it moved. Not like a person. Not like something alive. It glided, without a sound, without shifting weight, without any acknowledgement of gravity. And it was coming toward him. Edgar took an instinctive step back, but his boots scraped against the stone floor, the noise shattering the silence like a gunshot. The figure stopped. Its head, or what should have been a head, tilted unnaturally to the side. Then, it spoke. A woman's voice, cold and hollow, whispering 3 words. "You opened it?" A chill ran through Edgar's entire body. He hadn't opened anything. The gate was still sealed, still whole. Crack. His stomach dropped. Crack. Crack. The stone of the gate began to splinter. Something inside was waking up. He turned back toward the shadowy figure, but it was gone. The corridor leading back up to the castle was now pitch black. No escape. The only way out was through. Through the gate. Through her. Edgar's hands shook as he lifted his camera, recording everything. If this was his last night, someone had to know what happened here. Then, with a deep breath, he reached out and placed both hands against the gate. It was warm. Like flesh. And then, it pushed back. The chamber shook violently, as if the entire castle was breathing. A gust of wind rushed through the underground space, though there were no windows, no openings, no place for wind to come from. Then, Edgar saw her. At first, it was just a blur, a pale shape emerging from the cracks in the gate. But then, she stepped forward. A woman, draped in a tattered white gown. Her face was hidden beneath a veil, but her lips, black and blood-stained, were twisted into something between a smile and a scream. She stood there, inches from the gate, her fingers curled against the stone. And she was looking directly at him. Edgar felt his body lock in place, an invisible force holding him still. Her lips parted. And in a voice that sent ice through his veins, she whispered, "You came for me." The gate burst open. And the screaming began. The moment the gate burst open, Edgar felt a force slam into his chest. He was thrown backward, landing hard against the cold stone floor. Then the screams. Not just one. Not just 2. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Agonized, tortured, inhuman. The air turned thick with whispers, voices overlapping, suffocating, filling his head with words he didn't understand. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't obey. And then, through the swirling darkness, she stepped out. The lady in white. But now, she was no longer trapped behind the veil. Her face was visible. And Edgar wished it wasn't. Her eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to stretch infinitely inward. Her skin was cracked porcelain, as if she had been broken and glued back together, but not quite right. And her mouth. Her lips curled upward, but the edges of her smile stretched too far, splitting open into the pale skin of her cheeks. She had no teeth. Only a dark, endless void. She tilted her head, her neck cracking. Then, she spoke. "Why did you come, Edgar?" His blood froze. She knew his name. His entire body trembled as he tried to force words out of his dry throat. What are you?" She took a step forward, bare feet silent against the cold floor. "You already know." And in that moment Edgar did. She wasn't just a ghost. She was something older. Something hungrier. And he had let her out. Behind her, the open gate seethed with shadows. Figures crawled from the darkness, their bodies twisted and broken, their eyes milky white. Some were missing limbs, some crawled on all fours, and others stood with their heads dangling unnaturally to the side as if their necks had been snapped. Their faces. He recognized some of them. The missing villagers. Mrs. Holloway had warned him those who entered never came back. Now he understood why. They never left. They had been taken. And now, so would he. The lady in white raised her hand, palm facing upward, as if offering something unseen. "Come with me, Edgar." Pain exploded in his chest. Edgar screamed, clutching his ribs. Something was burning inside him. He tore open his jacket and shirt, desperate to see what was happening. Right over his heart, a mark had appeared, a symbol carved into his flesh, glowing with an unholy light. It was the same symbol etched into the gate. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was marked. Marked for her. The lady's voice turned soft, almost tender. "It is already done, Edgar. You belong to me now." Edgar's instincts finally snapped into action. He turned and ran. His boots pounded against the stone floor, his breath ragged. Behind him, the whispers turned into laughter. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just amused. Like he was a child, trying to outrun the tide. He reached the stone staircase, scrambling up. The temperature shifted violently from freezing to burning hot in a second. His vision blurred. The walls around him twisted, the stairs stretching longer and longer, as if the castle itself would not let him leave. Then, a hand gripped his ankle. Cold. Thin. And impossibly strong. He didn't have time to scream before he was yanked backward into the darkness. The door at the top of the stairs slammed shut. And Blackthorn Castle, once again, swallowed another soul. The morning after Edgar's disappearance, Blackthorn Village felt different. The air was heavier, the sky overcast, as if the very land knew something was wrong. Mrs. Holloway stood by her window, staring up at Blackthorn Castle, now shrouded in thick mist. She knew what had happened. She had warned him. Now, it was too late. The boy was gone. But what unsettled her most was the silence. Whenever the gate was opened, the village could always feel it, the sudden shift in the wind, the restless whispers in the night, the shadowed figures lingering at the edge of the forest. But this time, it was quiet. Too quiet. And that meant one thing. The lady in white had found what she was looking for. Detective Elliot Henshaw was the first outsider to come looking for Edgar. A missing person report had been filed in London. No one had heard from him. His editor said Edgar had been researching a medieval ghost story. That led Elliot here to a village that wanted nothing to do with him. Mrs. Holloway refused to speak. The locals avoided his gaze. The bartender at the inn muttered a single warning before walking away. Leave before it's too late. But Elliot wasn't easily scared. Breaking into Edgar's rented room, he searched for clues. And that's when he found the camera. A single video file. Timestamp, the night Edgar disappeared. Hands trembling, Elliot pressed play. The screen flickered. Then Edgar's terrified face appeared. Edgar was panting, shaking, his camera held too close to his face. "If someone finds this, if someone hears this, don't go near the castle." His voice was ragged, broken, like he had been running for his life. Behind him, the chamber was pitch black, except for a single figure. A woman. Veiled. Smiling. "I made a mistake." The camera glitched, distorting the image. Then, a whisper. Not Edgar's. Not human. "He is mine now." The screen cut to black. Elliot's stomach turned cold. And then the whisper returned. This time, from right behind him. Elliot spun around, heart hammering. The room was empty. But the air had shifted, the temperature had dropped, and the faint scent of damp earth and decay now filled the space. Something had been here. Something was still watching. His instinct told him to burn the camera, leave the case, and never look back. But he didn't. Because when he turned back to the footage, he saw something worse. On the last frame of the video, frozen in the darkness, a symbol had appeared on Edgar's chest. A glowing mark, carved into his skin. And when Elliot looked down at his own hand, the same mark had started to burn into his palm. A sharp knock at the door made him jump. Elliot turned, pulse racing. The old wooden door rattled again. Knock. 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 Not urgent. Not frantic. Just, patient. The kind of knock that waited for you to open. Slowly, cautiously, Elliot moved to the door. He hesitated for just a second before unlocking it. The door creaked open, revealing a hooded figure standing in the dim hallway. A woman, wrapped in a dark cloak. Her face was pale, lined with age, eyes filled with something Elliot couldn't quite name. She stared at him for a long time. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said. "If you don't leave now, detective, you'll never leave at all." Elliot stared at the hooded woman, every instinct telling him to slam the door shut. But something about her froze him in place. She didn't look threatening, not in the way a murderer or a thief might. But her eyes. Her eyes were old. Older than the lines on her face, older than the village itself. She stepped forward, her voice low and urgent. "You have to leave before nightfall." Elliot swallowed. "Who are you?" The woman ignored his question. Instead, she reached out and grabbed his wrist. The moment her fingers touched his skin, his entire body seized up a sharp, electric pain surged through his veins. He gasped, trying to pull away. But when he looked down at his palm, the mark was glowing brighter. The woman's expression darkened. "It's already begun." Elliot ripped his arm away, stumbling back. "What the hell is happening to me?" The woman sighed, as if she had been expecting this. "You touched the boy's things, didn't you?" Elliot's mind raced. The camera. The recording. The footage. Something on that damn video had reached out and latched onto him. "It doesn't just take the ones who enter the castle," the woman continued. "It takes those who seek the truth." Elliot's blood ran cold. The curse was spreading. And now he was marked. The woman turned, motioning for him to follow. "Come. There's something you need to see." Elliot hesitated. Every logical part of him screamed not to trust her. But then, his palm burned again. A sharp, searing pain, like hot iron pressed to flesh. He didn't have a choice. They walked through the village, down narrow cobblestone streets, past old houses with windows shut tight. It felt like a ghost town. As if everyone knew something terrible was coming. The woman led him beyond the village, to an overgrown field shrouded in mist. And there, hundreds of nameless graves. Unmarked. Forgotten. Hidden. "These are the ones before you," she murmured. "The ones who searched for the missing. The ones who never left." Elliot's chest tightened. This wasn't just a legend. This had been happening for centuries. "Who is she?" Elliot whispered, voice barely steady. "The woman in the castle." The hooded woman stared at the graves, her expression unreadable. "She was once like you." Elliot's breath hitched. A seeker of truth. A writer. A traveler. But she went too far. She stepped where she shouldn't have. And now. The woman exhaled shakily. "She is something else. Not a ghost. Not just a curse. Something older. Hungrier. She needs others to suffer as she did. To keep the curse alive." Elliot's heartbeat thundered. This wasn't just a haunting. This was a trap. And Edgar had walked straight into it. Now, so had he. The wind shifted. The air went still. And then the whispers began. Low at first. Just a murmur carried by the wind. Then louder. More voices. Hundreds. Thousands. Elliot's head snapped up. In the fog, figures were forming. Not just shadows, people. Pale, silent, watching from the mist. The dead. The woman grabbed Elliot's arm, her grip tight with urgency. "They know you're here." The whispers became voices. Then, voices became screams. And from the mist, the lady in white stepped forward. Elliot's breath caught in his throat. She was right there. The lady in white stood at the edge of the mist, her face veiled, her gown trailing over the dead earth like drifting fog. She wasn't walking. She was gliding. Silent. Watching. The whispers around them grew frantic, as if the very air was trying to warn Elliot to run. But he couldn't move. His legs felt anchored, his body frozen in the icy grip of her presence. Then she spoke. Not in a whisper. Not in a scream. But in a voice that echoed from deep within his own mind. "You should not have come." The hooded woman yanked at his arm. "Don't listen to her," she hissed. But Elliot couldn't look away. Because for a brief moment, just a split second, he saw past the veil. And what lay beneath was not human. The moment their eyes met, everything changed. The whispers exploded into screams. The ground beneath them shook violently, as if something massive was clawing its way up from the depths. The air turned thick, suffocating, and then a force slammed into Elliot's chest. It was like being hit by a wave, his body lifted off the ground and thrown backward. He crashed onto the wet earth, gasping for breath. The hooded woman stood between him and the lady, arms raised, chanting in a language Elliot didn't recognize. The lady in white didn't move. She didn't need to. Because from behind her the dead began to step forward. Hundreds of them. Silent. Hollow-eyed. Reaching. And Elliot realized the horrifying truth. They weren't just spirits. They were the ones who had come before him. The ones who had tried to fight. The ones who had failed. "Run," the woman shouted. Elliot's body finally obeyed. He turned and sprinted toward the village, his legs moving faster than his mind could process. The fog was closing in, shadows twisting between the trees, the air thick with the stench of decay. Behind him, the voices of the dead grew louder. Not screams anymore. Laughter. A cruel, hollow laughter, as if they had seen this all before. As if they knew how this would end. Elliot's foot caught on a root. He stumbled, nearly falling. And that's when he felt it. A hand. Gripping his ankle. Cold. Dead. Dragging him down. Elliot kicked and thrashed, but the grip was unnaturally strong. Then, from the ground itself something began to rise. A hand, bone-thin and rotted, pushing up from the wet soil. Then another. And another. The ground was opening, revealing a pit of writhing bodies, pulling, reaching, hungry. Elliot screamed, his nails clawing at the earth as he tried to pull himself free. Then the hooded woman grabbed him. With strength he didn't expect, she hauled him back, breaking the dead's grip just as the earth sealed itself shut. He gasped, chest heaving, eyes wide with terror. The woman didn't even look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the lady in white, still standing motionless in the mist. "She's toying with you," the woman whispered. "She wants you to run. To struggle. It makes the hunt more fun." Elliot's blood ran cold. He wasn't escaping. He was being played with. The woman grabbed his face, forcing him to look into her eyes. "Listen to me. You have two choices. Leave now and forget what you've seen. Or step further and become part of the story." Elliot's heart pounded. Forget. How could he forget any of this? "There is no saving him," she added, voice softer. It took Elliot a second to realize what she meant. She was talking about Edgar. His stomach twisted. "He's already gone," she said. "And if you stay, you will be too." But Elliot wasn't just a detective. He was a seeker of truth. And he never left a case unsolved. His answer was clear. "Then tell me everything." The woman's face darkened. Then, she simply whispered, "So be it." From the mist, the lady in white smiled. Because she had been waiting for those words. The fog swirled, closing in like a living thing. The hooded woman let go of Elliot and took a step back. "You don't understand what you've done," she murmured. Elliot wiped the cold sweat from his brow, trying to calm his pounding heart. "I'm not leaving," he said firmly. "Tell me everything." The woman exhaled deeply, staring at him like she was looking through him. Then she did something he didn't expect. She turned to the lady in white. And spoke to her. In the same, twisted language the spirits had whispered before. Elliot's breath caught. The lady in white tilted her head slightly, listening. Then she laughed. Not a human laugh. But a sound that shattered the air like breaking glass. Elliot staggered back, his hands flying to his ears. And in that moment, he understood. The hooded woman wasn't trying to save him. She was making a deal. The air went still. The lady in white spoke again, her voice drifting like a cold wind through Elliot's mind. A trade. Elliot's skin crawled. A life for a life, she continued. You want the truth? You want your friend? Then pay the price. Elliot's stomach twisted. What price? He forced out. The lady in white lifted her hand and from the mist, something emerged. A boy. Thin. Dressed in ragged clothes. His eyes hollow. Elliot felt sick. It was the same boy from the photograph. The one who had disappeared hundreds of years ago. The lady turned to Elliot. Free him. And take his place. Elliot's mind raced. The lady was offering him a way out, but at what cost? You expect me to just stay here? To become one of them? The lady's smile widened beneath her veil. Justice. You came looking for it, did you not? The boy stared at Elliot, his lips trembling. He was real. He wasn't just a spirit. He was alive. Trapped. Elliot's hands clenched into fists. Could he really leave someone behind? Was his own life worth more than this boy's? Then he noticed. The hooded woman's eyes. They were pleading. She was trying to tell him something, but not with words. With silence. And Elliot understood. This was the final trick. The moment he agreed, the curse would bind him forever. Just like it had done to everyone before him. Elliot took a slow breath. Then he did something the curse never expected. He stepped forward. But instead of taking the boy's place, he grabbed him. And ran. The lady in white screamed. The mist exploded, swirling into a storm of shadows and howling voices. The boy gasped, clutching onto Elliot as they sprinted through the graveyard. The hooded woman yelled after them, but Elliot didn't stop. He could hear the dead closing in, their voices furious. Because Elliot had broken the rules. This wasn't how the game was played. And now, the curse was angry. Branches slashed at Elliot's face as he ran, the boy gasping for air beside him. They burst through the fog, heading for the village. But the village was gone. The road that had led them here? Gone. The lights of the houses? Gone. Only endless forest remained. A new whisper slithered through the air. You cannot leave. Elliot's chest tightened. They weren't escaping. They had only run deeper into the trap. And now, they were completely alone. Elliot's breath came in ragged gasps as he clutched the boy's wrist. The village was gone, vanished like it had never existed. Instead, they stood in an endless forest, the trees looming like silent sentinels, their branches twisting unnaturally. The boy shivered, his small fingers tightening around Elliot's arm. Where are we? The boy whispered. Elliot swallowed hard, his pulse hammering. I don't know. But he did know one thing. They weren't in the real world anymore. The moment he had broken the rules, the curse had shifted. It had swallowed them whole. And now, there was no way back. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No wind. No rustling leaves. No animals. Just silence. And the feeling of being watched. Elliot gritted his teeth, pulling the boy close. We need to move, he murmured. The boy hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. They're here. Elliot felt his stomach drop. Who? The boy didn't answer. But then, Elliot saw them. Between the trees shadows moved. Not walking. Not running. Just standing. Waiting. And the moment Elliot's eyes landed on them, they disappeared. Elliot grabbed the boy's hand and started moving fast, his boots crunching against the cold ground. We need to find a way out. They walked for minutes. Maybe hours. But no matter which way they turned, the landscape never changed. Everywhere was the same twisted forest, the same lifeless trees, the same path stretching endlessly ahead. And then they saw it. The same fallen log they had passed earlier. The same crooked tree with the gash in its bark. They had been walking in circles. The boy stiffened. It's a maze. Elliot exhaled sharply. No. It's worse than that. The boy looked up at him, wide-eyed. Elliot's voice was grim. It's a trap. For the first time they heard sound. Footsteps. Not theirs. Elliot froze, his heart pounding. The boy pressed against him, eyes wide. The footsteps were slow. Measured. And coming from all around them. A shuffling, deliberate sound, like something dragging itself through the trees. Then a voice. You took what wasn't yours. Elliot's blood turned ice cold. The voice wasn't human. It wasn't a whisper. It was a chorus. 1,000 voices, layered on top of each other, speaking as one. And they weren't far away. Elliot spun around, looking for a way out. The trees shifted in the mist, twisting, reshaping, closing in. They were running out of time. Then he saw it. A door. Standing alone in the middle of the forest. No walls. No structure. Just a single, rotting wooden door, standing impossibly upright, its frame half covered in vines. The boy's eyes widened. That wasn't there before. Elliot's breath was shaky. I know. And then. The door creaked open. Inviting them inside. Elliot stared at the door, heart hammering. It stood alone, defying every rule of logic. Behind them, the footsteps grew louder. We don't have a choice, Elliot muttered. He grabbed the boy's wrist and pushed the door open. Inside was nothing. Just an endless black void. No walls. No floor. Just darkness stretching forever. The boy hesitated. It's not real, he whispered. Elliot looked back. The shadows in the trees were moving. Whatever was hunting them was getting closer. With no other option, Elliot took a deep breath. And stepped inside. The moment they crossed the threshold they fell. Not down. Not up. Just fell. Weightless, directionless, like being swallowed by a void. The boy screamed. Elliot's stomach flipped, his pulse hammering as the blackness stretched on forever. Then. They hit the ground. But there was no impact. No pain. Just, a sudden shift. And then. They were standing. In a place that should not exist. Elliot's breath caught. They were back in the village. But something was wrong. The sky was a murky shade of gray, and the houses were rotting, collapsing under time's weight. The air smelled of mildew and something ancient. Is this, the past? The boy whispered. Before Elliot could answer. The church bell rang. A deep, hollow sound that sent shivers down his spine. And then, from the houses people stepped out. Dressed in tattered, old-fashioned clothes, their faces pale and sunken. Their eyes black and hollow. And they were all staring at Elliot. Like they had been waiting for him. The villagers didn't move. Didn't blink. Just watched. Then one of them stepped forward. An old man, his face deeply lined, his body draped in a long black coat. His eyes weren't hollow like the others. He looked alive. Too alive. You shouldn't have come here, he said. Elliot's mouth went dry. Where is here? The man sighed, shaking his head. A place for the cursed. His gaze locked onto Elliot's. You were not meant to leave the forest. Elliot's blood ran cold. They had broken a rule again. And now. They were in a place worse than the woods. Elliot tensed, his fingers twitching. What do you mean? The man sighed, glancing at the villagers behind him. We are the ones who tried to escape the curse. Elliot's stomach tightened. Tried. The man's face darkened. Failed. Elliot felt something shift in the air. A creeping sensation, like being watched by 1,000 unseen eyes. The boy tugged at Elliot's sleeve, his voice barely a whisper. Look. Elliot followed his gaze. To the church. And the figure standing in its broken doorway. A woman. Dressed in a tattered white gown. Her face hidden beneath a veil. The lady in white. She had followed them here. And this time. She wasn't smiling. She was waiting. The lady in white stood at the broken church door, motionless. Elliot felt a cold, creeping dread coil around his spine. The villagers stepped back, heads bowed, as if in reverence or fear. The boy clutched Elliot's sleeve, his voice barely a whisper. "She's calling us." Elliot swallowed hard. He didn't hear anything. But the boy's expression changed, his eyes darkening, body tensing. And then his lips moved, as if speaking words that weren't his own. "Come inside, Elliot." Elliot's breath hitched. That wasn't the boy's voice. It was hers. Elliot's feet moved before he realized. Something pulled him forward. Not a force. Not hands. But a whispering urge buried deep in his mind. The lady in white didn't move. She stood in the shadows of the crumbling church, her veil shifting slightly in the breeze. As Elliot and the boy crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them. The air inside was thick, heavy with the scent of decay and candle wax. And at the altar, a row of figures knelt, their heads bowed, hands clasped. They weren't praying. They were waiting. And as Elliot took another step, they all turned their heads at once. Elliot's breath came fast and shallow. The kneeling figures, a dozen of them, stared at him with vacant eyes. Their lips moved, but no sound came out. The boy trembled, gripping Elliot's wrist. "We need to leave." Elliot nodded, stepping back. And then the church bell rang. A deep, hollow chime that shook the air. The figures stood in unison. Their bodies moved stiffly, like puppets on invisible strings. And then they smiled. A wide, grotesque grin that stretched too far. Elliot froze. Something was very, very wrong. The lady in white raised her hand. And the congregation began to hum. A low, unnatural melody that sank into Elliot's bones. The boy winced, covering his ears. "Don't listen," he gasped. Elliot tried to shut it out, but the sound wrapped around his mind like vines. The hymn grew louder, heavier, pressing against his skull. Until he saw it. At the altar, a hymnal book lay open. Its pages weren't paper. They were flesh. Stitched together, covered in dark, dried blood. And the words written on them were moving. Shifting. Changing. Forming his name. Elliot stumbled backward, pulse hammering. The hymn grew frenzied, the figures stepping closer. The lady in white tilted her head. Her voice was soft, lilting, cold. "Your name is written, Elliot." His throat went dry. "What do you want?" She lifted her veil. And Elliot finally saw her face. Skin pale as bone. Eyes black, bottomless voids. And where her mouth should be was a gaping hole. A twisted, yawning abyss that let out the hymn itself. And in that moment, Elliot understood. This wasn't a church. This was an altar. And he was the next sacrifice. Elliot's mind reeled. The hymn was inside him now, threading through his thoughts, pulling him deeper. The lady in white stepped forward, her hollow mouth stretching wider, the sound growing unbearable. The congregation's smiles split their faces, and their voices joined hers. The church shook. Candles flickered, casting shifting shadows on the rotting walls. The boy gritted his teeth, clutching his head. "We need to run." Elliot couldn't move. The hymn had him trapped. And then the pages of the hymnal flipped violently, revealing a final passage. One that wasn't written in blood, but in fire. The words burned across the page, forming symbols Elliot didn't recognize. But somehow, he understood them. "Sing it back," the boy gasped. Elliot's body shook, his throat raw. The congregation was closing in. The lady in white reached for him. If he waited too long, he would be consumed. Summoning every ounce of strength, Elliot opened his mouth and sang. The hymn twisted, reversed, notes warping in the air. The church groaned. The congregation screamed. The lady in white jerked backward, her form flickering, as if she was unraveling. And then the church bell rang one last time. The world shattered. The church's walls cracked. The stained glass windows burst inward, shards dissolving into mist. The congregation collapsed, their smiles melting into nothingness. The lady in white let out a silent wail, her veil disintegrating into dust. The hymn faded. And then the ground beneath them gave way. Elliot and the boy plunged into darkness. The last thing Elliot saw was the church crumbling into oblivion, and the lady in white reaching for him. Elliot's eyes snapped open. He was lying on cold, damp earth. The air smelled of pine and rain. He sat up, gasping. The church was gone. No ruins. No altar. Just the forest, silent and still. The boy groaned beside him, rubbing his temple. "Did we escape?" he whispered. Elliot looked around. The trees were the same, but the air felt lighter, as if the presence in the woods was finally gone. For the first time since entering the hollow path, there was no whispering. And then a gust of wind blew past them, carrying with it a single, tattered veil. Elliot's stomach twisted. The lady in white was gone. But something told him she wasn't finished with him yet. Elliot and the boy stumbled back toward the village. It was different now. The villagers were gone. The streets empty. It was as if the town itself had been erased from time. The sky shifted, no longer gray but not quite normal either. "What happens now?" the boy asked. Elliot exhaled, staring at the veil fluttering in the wind. "I don't know." But deep inside, he had a feeling the hollow path wasn't truly gone. Because in the distance, where the church once stood, the sound of a single bell echoed. Slow. Hollow. A warning. Or a promise. And Elliot knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Not ever. Thank you for listening to this story. But remember, never assume this is just a story. Who knows, something might be listening along with you right now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. But be careful, maybe after this, something else has subscribed behind you. See you in the next tale, and may your night remain peaceful, if it can.